Hello and welcome to Avalara's latest webinar on what you need to know about indirect tax compliance and e-invoicing in 2024. I'm Alex Bulff. I'm the Vice President of e-invoicing and Global Indirect Tax at Avalara. I have over 18 years experience within global indirect tax, working within consultancy for Deloitte and Grant Thornton, as well as working on very large global indirect tax transformation projects across the globe. Today at Avalara, I lead on global indirect tax, on VAT and e-invoicing, working with tax authorities and influencer bodies across the globe, as well as heading up products for our e-invoicing and live reporting solution. Outside of Avalara, I'm also a member of the European Commission's e-invoicing technical advisory group, as well as other working groups on e-invoicing across the globe. I represent Avalara at Open Peppol and GINA, the new organization that has replaced ISPA. And I'm also a member of the board of directors for the US's new e-invoicing association, the Digital Business Network Alliance. I'm really pleased to be joined today by my colleague, Camilla Verhat. Camilla recently joined the Avalara team. She's based in Paris, France. Camilla, please can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today. Camilla Verhat. I am the Director of the e-invoicing and live reporting at Avalara. I spent the last 14 years working on e-invoicing and e-reporting as a tax advisor at EY and Deloitte, and also other service providers, advising companies and tax administration to move with their e-invoicing and e-reporting obligations or models. I also represent Avalara within different local and international organizations as Alex within the ISPA, GINA Association, and also in France with the French tax administration.
Thanks so much, Camilla. Great to have you on board. So in this webinar, we're going to do a bit of a round robin around the globe, looking at big changes for the year ahead and slightly beyond. So we're going to kick off by looking at changes to VAT, GST rates from January this year. We're then going to do a bit of a deeper dive, looking at the e-invoicing, e-reporting, live reporting timeline for the next few years. So we can see, the key mandates. Some of them are still in draft, some are very, very fluid. But we're then going to double click and we're going to look at country-specific updates. We're going to deep dive in a number of the upcoming mandates within Europe. We're going to look at the latest on ViDA, VAT in the digital age. And outside of Europe, we're going to look at some big upcoming changes in Malaysia, as well as the US and the Digital Business Network Alliance. Before we dive straight in, I just wanted to provide a bit of an overview on Avalara. Hopefully, you know us already. You attend a lot of our webinars and events. We are a global tax technology company. We've been disrupting the status quo of global tax management since 2004. Originally founded, and we're still headquartered in the US, but today very much a global organization with offices across India, Brazil, our EMEA headquarters in Brighton in the UK, and offices and people across Europe too. We have cloud-based solutions to automate the entire indirect tax end-to-end lifecycle, and our solutions cover 193 countries. We have over 1,200 pre-built signed integrations, and we support over 30,000 customers globally. So I'm now going to look at some VAT or GST rate changes in 2024. So these are changes that have been confirmed from the 1st of January, the start of the year. Firstly, the Czech Republic, a new reduced rate of 12%. This consolidates the two existing reduced rates, the 15 and 10. In Estonia, there's been an increase in the standard rate of VAT from 20 to 22%. And in Luxembourg, we've seen an increase in the standard rate from 16% to 17%. We've seen a change in the intermediary rate from 13 to 14, the reduced rate from 7 to 8. And so in effect, these rates return to their pre-2023 levels. In Singapore, we've seen the GST rate increase from 8 to 9%. And in Switzerland, and this also applies to Liechtenstein as well, the standard rate has increased from 7.7% to 8.1%, and the reduced rate has increased from 2.5 to 2.6. There's also been a change to the special rate for accommodation services, up from 3.7 to 3.8. And then finally, looking at Thailand, the temporary VAT rate reduction, so the rate has been reduced from 10 to 7. This has been extended again to the 30th of September this year. So now moving to e-invoicing and e-reporting, this is obviously the clear direction of travel for tax authorities globally. This timeline, the slide on the screen now, is always very fluid. We have to change this, sometimes several times a week, based on legislative changes, updates from tax authorities, and of course, this is only indicative. There are literally over 100 different countries at the moment looking at e-invoicing in some form at different stages of the life cycle, from consultation, draft legislation, as well as just exploring different models with advisors. I always like to start off presenting the slide looking at the left corner, the first column, because really over the last 20 years, the majority of e-invoicing has really been in Latin America. The trailblazers, Brazil, Chile, Mexico, virtually the rest of the continent and region followed very quickly. And where we saw e-invoicing in Europe, it tended to be more around public procurement, business to government. And if there was some form of live reporting, this tended to be parallel to the invoice. It was, more consolidated reporting, periodic reporting, every few days or months. But what we've started to see, and we saw this in 2022, was more and more e-invoicing requirements spread across the EU. So Italy was the first country in 2019. The scope of that mandate has increased almost every year since. We've seen countries like Portugal, not necessarily mandating e-invoicing for B2B, but putting very strict requirements on the issuing of invoices, using certified software, having a QR code, having pre-cleared invoice numbers from the tax authority. And that trend has continued last year, and really this year now, 2024, is a big milestone year. We're going to see big new e-invoicing mandates, Romania, Poland, Malaysia, and also setting the foundations for a lot more mandates over the next 2 to 3 years as well. Camilla, is there anything on here you'd like to talk about? Any countries standing out?
Yeah, sure. Maybe we can high level some updates we have regarding Ireland, where the Irish public consultation process has been extended to the 31st of January 2024. If you have business who are in Ireland, you have the time, to contribute to this public consultation. We have also news about Croatia, who submitted a request for derogation last year. So we are expecting for an e-invoicing mandate in 2026. If you have business in the Philippines, in principle, the e-invoicing, e-reporting is already live. So you will have the obligation to report your invoicing data to the tax authorities in the JSON format through an electronic invoicing system. And we are also hearing some noise from Oman, where they are planning to introduce an e-invoicing mandate with a voluntary implementation starting in April and mandatory e-invoicing starting from October this year. But we don't have any real official confirmation about that, so we will be monitoring this for you.
Thanks, Camilla. So really e-invoicing in every single region, every single continent. It's not just an EU or Latin America initiative. And I think we're going to see every single EU member state have an e-invoicing mandate, as we move towards ViDA, VAT and the digital age, probably now in 2030. And we're going to talk about that in more detail later. But as I always say, that date for ViDA is not the starting gun. That's really the finishing line. And we expect most member states to have their own domestic ViDA compliant e-invoicing mandates in place ahead of that date. And Oman was mentioned, the GCC region is really interested in e-invoicing. We've seen the mandate in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia gradually spread to more and more businesses. Almost every month now, they announce another phase, another wave, reducing the threshold for companies to be compliant. And the UAE has already announced in its budget last year that it is looking to introduce e-invoicing as a big strategic initiative to help digitalization in the country, but also to improve tax compliance. And recently a PEPL authority for the UAE has been set up too. So we're going to start by looking at Romania. This is a mandate which has started already, although it's in place. Technically, it's not mandatory, but Camilla's going to tell us a bit more information about this. Over to you, Camilla.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So for Romania, we had some changes last year about the way how Romania is planning to introduce this e-invoicing mandate. So first of all, what you need to know is that we will have two steps in terms of this e-invoicing. The first step will be applicable from January to June this year, where taxpayers will have the obligation to report to the national portal invoicing data. And this is what we call e-reporting obligation or live reporting. This means that if you are operating in Romania during this first period, in addition to the fact that you will need to send your e-reporting data to the tax authorities, you will continue to send your invoicing to your client or receive them as you are already doing. But from July 2024, we will move forward from e-reporting obligation to an e-invoicing obligation. This means that starting from July 2024, you will have the obligation to send your invoice to this national portal called e-Fatura, and then your client will have the obligation to get his invoice from this portal. It's usually a model that we call centralized model, where you will have the obligation to use a national portal to issue and receive your invoices. We had also some clarifications about the companies that are in the scope of this mandate. So the e-invoicing applies for taxpayers who are established in Romania, and also be aware that this is also applicable for taxpayers who are not established but registered for VAT purpose in Romania. In the guide that has been published by the Romanian tax authorities, you can find also more details in terms of the transactions that are exempted from the obligation to use the national portal, either for e-invoicing and e-reporting. So it is very important for you to analyze those requirements and their impact on your business, to identify which transactions is going to be in the scope of this e-invoicing and which transaction is not going to be. What we have also as information is that if you fail to send those e-invoicing or e-reporting, you will be subject to penalties. As you can see here in the slide, depending on the size of your company, different fines will be applicable. What you need to know also, maybe as I told, is that those e-invoicing has to go through this e-Fatura system. You need to be ready to create or use a service provider who can help you to create a compliant invoice within an XML format as required by the Romanian tax administration. And also an important information that we can share is related to the fact that whenever you are going to send an invoice to the Romanian tax portal, they will execute a check of your invoice, and if the invoice is validated, they will send you back what we call a signed XML invoice, and this is considered as the validated invoice that you should use for your accounting, etc. And of course, there will be a lot of technical things that you should consider before registering to the portal and being able to send your invoices directly or use a service provider to do it on your behalf. I think that's it from Romania, Alex, in terms of what we have in terms of updates.
Thanks, Camilla. No, really interesting, and that Romanian mandate has been implemented very, very quickly. Originally, that platform could have been used for business to government, certain high risk taxpayers, but the derogation and confirmation of the legislation actually came quite quickly and quite late in the year last year. So it's been great to see businesses react very, very quickly, understand the requirements, and working with their service providers. I think it's interesting to know that the e-reporting equally applies to non-resident businesses who have a Romanian VAT number. So if you have a Romanian VAT number for your US, EU, UK business, do take advice on the implications there. But we expect there to be more guidance, more clarity. A lot of businesses are looking at how do they share invoices with their counterparties. It is a centralized model, as Camilla said, but some businesses are looking at human readable versions. There is a style sheet available from the Romanian authorities. So certainly do prepare for this. If you're not ready now, do start looking at e-reporting, start looking at the whole end-to-end e-invoicing process in Romania. So we're now going to look at Poland. Poland launched a national e-invoicing system, KSEF. This has been operational over the last year, but the mandate, is due to come into effect, within the next 6 months from the 1st of July, 2024. So Camilla is going to provide a good overview and provide some recent updates in this area. Over to you again, Camilla.
So Poland, we have, as in Romania, 2 stages. B2B invoicing was supposed to be in force starting from July 2024 for non-exempt companies and from January 2025 for exempt companies. However, last week there was a press briefing by the Minister of Finance, during which it has been announced that the obligatory KSEF or the B2B e-invoicing mandate will not be introduced in 2024 as it was planned. So during this, let's say, intervention, the Minister of Finance stressed that they want to have KSEF ready, and they want to be sure that the portal is working correctly without any interruption that could impact the way how businesses are working in Poland. This is why it has been announced that in order to be sure that the KSEF portal is working correctly, this one will be audited in external auditors, and then it will be after this audit and the result of the audit that Poland is going to announce the new timeline for their B2B e-invoicing mandate. So there are, I'm sure, a lot of frustration already among companies who have been preparing for the Polish mandate for years now, because this mandate has been pushed different times, and now we are in a situation where it is pushed, but we don't know the date. So we will have to wait and to monitor this.
Regarding the scope of the B2B e-invoicing mandate, what we know so far is that the B2B e-invoicing mandate will be applicable for companies established in Poland. So it is important to be able to identify the type of the companies that you have in Poland to see if the e-invoicing will be applicable to you.
You will have the obligation to use the structured XML format that is required. In order to be able to send or receive your invoices, you will have the obligation to clear your invoice, which means that the invoice will be sent to this XF portal after validating the invoice. There will be an XF ID associated to your invoice to prove that the invoice has been validated. And also there are some technical requirements to consider when you are going to use XF, such as, for example, the fact that if you want to send attachment with your invoice, this is not possible. So you need to rethink about how you are sending your invoices and the attachment in order to find alternative ways to handle this type of process that you have already in place. The last update that we have from Poland is that the Ministry of Finance launched on November public consultations. We have two draft laws. The first one is related to the use of the XF. As you can see here, there are different things related to the scope of the data that are required in order to have access to the XF in case of failure. There will be, according to this public consultation, a mandatory QR code or verification code that will be mandatory on an invoice if you decided to send an invoice outside the XF portal. They are also introducing new types of authorization and authentication in order to have access to the XF portal. The other draft of the law is related to the content of the e-invoicing regulation itself. So for some invoices that will be issued by exempt taxpayers from January 2025, you should keep in mind the fact that you will have to add on your issued invoices a new field that is related to the tax identification number. And there are also some simplifications about the issuance of an invoice related to continuous services. As far as we know, the public consultation is closed and the process of validation the law is still moving forward. So here again, we'll keep you informed as far as we have more information from Poland related to those draft laws.
Thanks, Camilla. So now moving on to France, this has got a lot of people's attention. There is a lot of buzz in the market because France, is such a huge country, over 4 million businesses that would be affected by an e-invoicing mandate. Originally we had expected this mandate to be effective the 1st of July 2024, later this year. There's been a lot of changes. If I remember, just before the summer vacation period, a press release was issued from the government to say that the mandate was being paused. That the effective date would no longer be July 24, and then we waited over the summer for confirmation in the new finance bill. So finally, I understand even though there's been various changes, various different dates reported, we now have clarity on the new timeline. Can you provide an update and overview of that, please?
Yeah, so maybe for an overview about the requirement and the things that are still applicable in France. In France, we are introducing two obligations. The first one is called mandatory B2B e-invoicing that will be applicable for domestic B2B transactions. In order for companies to issue those invoices, they need to use, or they will have the option to use 3 different formats, which are UBL, CII, or FactureX. FactureX is a PDF that includes an XML in it, so human-friendly, let's say, to use by companies. The other obligation is the e-reporting, which is applicable for non-domestic B2B invoicing data, B2C, and also payment data. Those data need to be sent to the French tax administration by using, let's say, a new format, which will be an XML format defined by the French tax administration. In order for companies to be able to send or receive invoices, they will have 2 options: either use what we call an approved third party, or in plateforme de dématérialisation partenaire, or PDP, or use the public e-invoicing portal, which is a free portal that will be made available by the French tax administration. So as Alex said, we had a lot of uncertainties during this summer in terms of the timeline that will be applicable in France. Regarding this new timeline, we finally had, let's say, another new timeline and final version in December. So what we know in France is that if you are a large company and you are doing business in France, you will have the obligation to issue electronic invoices starting from September 2026. If you are also a member of what we call in French Groupe TVA or VAT Group, you will also have the obligation to issue electronic invoices, even if you are a small company within this VAT Group. And also we will have a mandatory e-invoicing that will be applicable for inbound invoices. And in this case, we don't take into consideration the size of the company. For all of the other type of companies, mid-size companies and small ones, e-invoicing will be applicable from September 2027. This has been said, what you should know is that in the regulation itself, the French tax administration can also push this calendar until December 2027 or December 2026 if they think that they are not ready. And in addition to that, there will be also another condition related to the result of the request for approval, for which France need to ask again in order to be able to make e-invoicing mandatory. This timeline I just presented is related to the companies or taxpayers. What we don't have as information so far is the timeline that will be applicable for the PDPs and the registration process. So we had an initial timeline for the PDPs where they were supposed to apply and get the accreditation number by July 2024 and go through a certification process by June 2025. But because of this new timeline related to the e-invoicing mandate itself, we are expecting for a new timeline for the registration process. Because of the time, I will not go into details related to this timeline, but we invite you maybe to go to our blog, to read our last article about the timeline expected in France for those PDPs.
Thanks, Camilla. And, of course, we'll keep monitoring, the situation in France. Actually, one thing I will ask you a quick question. I've just seen this as a question raised in the chat around PDPs in France. You provided an update on the process. Can you just be very clear? Are there any certified PDPs today? Because I have seen various different companies and different locations, different sizes, announce that they are a PDP. Can you just provide that snapshot of where we are in that process and what the expected timeline is?
Yeah, sure. So far we don't have any registered PDP or any service provider for which the French tax administration delivered what we call the accreditation number. So what we know for sure is that starting from last June 2023, the service providers who want to be a PDP have the possibility to apply by providing a set of documentation to the French tax administration. So since June until now, we didn't hear from the French tax administration, who said that they are planning to publish the list of the providers who applied. So as a next step, what we are waiting is to have the list of those service providers who apply to be a PDP. But this doesn't mean that they are already a PDP. This means that they just apply and they need to wait for the step that the French tax administration is calling the instruction step. So the French tax administration will review the documentation that has been submitted by those service providers. And then after that, they need to go through an external audit by using an external service provider or auditor who will need to audit the implemented solution to check that everything that has been said in the documentation is in fact implemented in the solution, and then the solution is compliant. So we need to wait a little bit to be able to have the final version of those certified service provider. Hope this clarifies things, Alex.
No, it really does, Camilla. Thank you so much. I just wanted to be very clear on that, just because we see various different claims, various different timeline shared. So I think that's really interesting. And the other thing I'd say is, look, the PDPs are working together. We have to. It doesn't matter if 1 or 2 or 3 PDPs have a big interoperability network. The mandate will only work if every single PDP is interoperable with every other PDP. For a lot of these mandates, we're all in this together. We're going to work together. Everyone's customer is another trading partner of another service provider's customer base. So, this is a journey. I think that additional time is really, really important. It gives the French tax authorities time to look at specific use cases, maybe refine some of the guidance and technical information. It gives more time for the core infrastructure to be built. It gives more time for service providers to design and test and build the solution. And then I think it gives more time for businesses to really plan an implementation. How does this affect day-to-day business, accounts payable, accounts receivable, procurement, how you interact with your trading partners. So I think overall it's positive. There's more breathing space, but obviously a lot of work to do in a very strategic country for a lot of multinational businesses. So thanks for the update. We're going to keep monitoring, and we look forward to working with businesses in France over the next couple of years on this. So we're now going to look at Belgium. So Belgium, by way of background, introduced a business-to-government e-invoicing mandate using PEPL. So this has been in play since last year. But there's an update, very hot off the press update, in relation to a broader B2B invoicing mandate in the country. Camilla, can you provide your update and overview on this as well, please?
Belgium published a draft last year about the expected or what they are planning in terms of requirement for their B2B e-invoicing mandate. So what we saw in this draft is that Belgium is planning what we call Bing Bang B2B e-invoicing mandate, which means that companies will have the obligation to issue and receive e-invoicing starting from January 2026. It is indicated in this project that the e-invoicing will not be mandatory or for B2C transactions for which you are issuing invoices according to the Belgium VAT regulation. In order to be able to make e-invoicing mandatory, Belgium already submitted a request for derogation in October 2023. So we need to wait for this approval in order to be able to see if we are going to move forward with this e-invoicing. But Belgium is quite comfortable because this derogation has been granted for other countries within the EU, so they don't see any reason for not getting this derogation. In order to help Belgian business to move forward with this e-invoicing, they are also announcing different measures to help the companies. It is expected to have tax deduction for investment related to invoicing project and also temporary tax support that would be available for the SMEs. This e-invoicing mandate will be applicable for companies established in Belgium and also for taxpayers not established but have a permanent establishment in Belgium. It seems that this is an important information also that you should consider if you are doing business in Belgium as a permanent establishment. In this draft of the law, we have also some exclusions related to some taxpayers for which e-invoicing will not be mandatory, and also they excluded some type of transactions also. So you need really to go into details in order to see if this e-invoicing is applicable for you or not. Belgium is planning to introduce a structured e-invoicing, and they are planning to promote the PAPL UBL format as a format to be exchanged, and also any other format that are compliant with the EU standard. Which means that starting from January 2026, the use of PDF invoices or any other non-structured format as you are already doing in Belgium will not be possible anymore. It is also planned to use the PAPL network in order to be able to exchange invoices, and it is also expected to provide the system that is already in place called Hermes if the receiver of the invoice is not known in the PAPL network. In terms of e-reporting in Belgium, we don't have any information in this law about this, and the Belgium tax administration said different times that they will probably wait for more information from the ViDA initiative to introduce an e-reporting obligation for non-domestic invoices, for example.
Perfect. Thanks, Camilla. So, Belgium is looking to use PEPL. There's already quite a high adoption of PEPL within Belgium. PEPL is being used to meet the business to government mandate that's already in place. The good news about PEPL is it's decentralized. So, businesses just need to find a PEPL service provider, an accredited or certified PEPL service provider. And once you have a PEPL ID number, you can connect to the network and you can invoice or receive invoices from any business on that network. Currently, around 750,000 businesses on that network. But of course, as we start to see wider mandates incorporate PEPL, the number on that network and in that directory will just naturally increase. So particularly with Belgium, there may be some involvement of the PEPL network in the French mandate, Singapore, Malaysia, and others likely to adopt PEPL too. PEPL was, introduced initially for public procurement, but today, very much, used for business to business exchange of invoices. And as you rightly said, the PEPL UBL format, which at the moment within the EU is the BIS3 format, that is compliant with the European e-invoicing standard EN 16931. We may see the international format of the PEPL invoice be adopted more widely. This is certainly on the roadmap across Asia Pac. We expect this to also take place in Europe, but that PINT, format will also be compliant with the European standard. So now on to Germany. Of course, huge economy, high GDP, a lot of companies here that would be affected by an e-invoicing mandate. There's already quite a high adoption of e-invoicing voluntarily in Germany, particularly on more legacy EDI technologies and formats. But Camilla, can you provide an overview of the latest in Germany, please?
Yes, Germany. So what we know so far is that all companies must be ready to receive invoices from January 2025, which means that from this date, if you have a supplier who is going to send you an invoice, you will have the obligation to receive it. And we don't have any information related to the format of the invoices that those suppliers are going to send to you. It is also planned an obligation to issue the invoices based on two stages. The first one will start from January 2027, and this will be applicable for companies with more than 8,100 euros of turnover, and the second stage will be applicable from January 2028. What you should bear in mind here is that Germany already have the derogation to issue electronic invoicing, but the different deadlines or the new timeline that we have here is not consistent with the derogation. So probably Germany need to ask again for a new derogation or to update the one that they have already in place. This e-invoicing will be applicable for taxpayers who are doing business in Germany, but some exemptions will be applicable. As simplified invoices and ticket for passenger transportation. But again, we need to wait for more details in the future. An important point related to the EDI exchanges, where in the first project of the law, Germany was planning to stop doing EDI exchanges in Germany. It seems that based in this law that the EDI exchange will still be possible until the end of 2027. In terms of formats and network or ways to exchange invoices, Germany, as the other EU countries, is planning to use a format that is compliant with the EU standard. And as I said, the EDIFACT format, we need to wait to get more clarity on that. Germany is not planning to introduce what we call a clearance model or planning to introduce a national portal. So it seems that it will be to companies to be able to find a way to exchange their invoices or to, as just explained by Alex, to move forward and to use the PayPal network in order to be able to exchange invoices. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to have what we call an interoperability framework in Germany if everyone decides to choose the format they want and the channels they want in order to exchange invoices.
Thanks, Camilla. So yeah, Germany, we expect to be, very much ViDA compliant from the get-go. When Germany submitted its application for a derogation to mandate, broader B2B e-invoicing, it did that. I think it was a week or 2 weeks before, the draft ViDA directives were published. So, we expect this to be, very much decentralized, compliant with the European e-invoicing standard, and actually, really building on the formats and standards that are used today in Germany. So the Exrechnung, which is a format, XML format that's supported on the PEPL network today. So it's an XML with an embedded PDF, so you can share a human readable version of the invoice, or the Zugford, which is actually technically identical to the Factor X invoice that you already mentioned in France. So that's a hybrid PDF A-3 which is a PDF to the human eye. It can be read, by accounts payable. It can be shared, even on email. But it has embedded XML, so it can still be processed automatically, read, interpreted, posted by a system. So our round robin across the EU continues. We're now going to provide an update on Spain.
Yes, Spain, actually, we have two obligations in Spain. The first one, for which we've, let's say, a confirmation or confirmed information, is related to the validation of the regulation setting out the requirement to adopt a computer or an electronic system and program in order to issue invoices. This obligation related to the ERP or the software used to create invoices will be applicable from July 2005 for taxpayers who are established in Spain. And it's important to bear in mind also that this obligation will be only applicable for taxpayers who are not doing SII in Spain. So this means that if you have already the obligation to submit the SII to the Spanish tax administration, you don't have the obligation to use these new systems. But if you don't have the SII obligation, you will have the obligation to use, let's say, a certified system or a system that meets the requirements that are listed in this regulation. So taxpayers will have two options in order to issue compliant invoices and using compliant softwares. Either they continue to use their ERP or software under the condition that these ERPs are going to be compliant, or use the computer application that maybe will be developed by the tax administration in order to help companies to be compliant. I'm not going to go in detail through the requirement, but basically there are a lot of technical requirements that are expected from the system or the ERP, such as guaranteeing the integrity and the authenticity of the invoice, archiving the invoice, be able to create event log, create hash or fingerprint to secure the invoice, and also includes different QR code on the invoice itself. So you should be able to check that your ERP is compliant, otherwise to find alternative solutions to be compliant with this new Spanish regulation. So this is not really an e-invoicing obligation, but let's say certified software or an accredited software, as you may already know, for example, in Portugal, where companies have already the obligation to use certified software.
Thanks, Camilla. Yeah, completely agree. I think Portugal is a really good example. These are regulations that apply to all invoicing, whether that's electronic or not. So we're certainly moving to a more certified regime, with minimum standards, around authenticity, integrity, traceability. A lot of the things we're seeing here, we're already starting to see individual tax authorities incorporate into mandates. So, particularly the things around, hashes, QR codes, guaranteeing integrity of data. We see this in the legislation in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So I certainly think this is something businesses should prepare for. Certain ERPs, I'm sure, will become certified. Others may, rely on partners or third-party e-invoicing providers to help with this certification. But Spain, there's so much going on in Spain. I'm not going to steal your thunder talking about the e-invoicing mandate, but often, people talk about a mandate in Spain. We had expected it to be 2024 on a very similar timeline to France. That's likely to be pushed back now. But there isn't just one set of requirements. businesses need to look at this holistically, because today, there's the SII. The SII is more periodic reporting every 4 days, invoices issued and received, submitted as an XML to the Spanish authorities. You then have, veri factu, more around the actual billing system, billing platform. But again, this will impact the contents of that invoice as well. There is then already a business to government mandate in Spain, and there is a very particular network to exchange invoices with government departments. So the FACE network. And then there's the FACE B2B network, which was originally set up for subcontractors within public procurement as part of bigger government contracts. But today, that network's also being used voluntarily by businesses to exchange e-invoices between trading partners in Spain. And then we're moving towards a more general e-invoicing mandate, which will include e-reporting, with the tax authority. So let's hear about that, Camilla.
Yeah. So about the e-invoicing in Spain, or the mandatory e-invoicing in Spain, as said by Alex, we are still waiting for the publication of the royal decree in the official gazette to have the final version of the date or the timeline of this e-invoicing mandate. So as we are still in the Q1 2024, we are hoping to have it this quarter. So if this happens, e-invoicing in Spain will be applicable from 2025, but we are monitoring this to get the confirmation. The model that Spain is planning is a little bit like the French one, because they are planning to give the taxpayers two options: either use the public billing portal, maybe it will be FACE or maybe another new one, and also use private service providers in order to be able to exchange invoices. The invoices can be issued by using 4 different formats, which are UBL, CII, EDIFACT, and the format that is already used for B2G, Fatura A. And also, if companies are going to use the public portal or the national one, they will have the obligation to use only the Fatura A as format to issue their invoices. The new thing in Spain is that the taxpayers will have the obligation to issue the different life cycles related to the invoice. So they will have 5 days to accept an invoice or reject it, and also submit to the tax administration the information related to the payment of the invoice, which is a little bit different from what we have in France, for example. And the good thing here is that we have a deadline to be able to submit those different life cycles. If you are planning to use private service providers to issue your invoices in Spain, then you will have the obligation to sign your invoice by using a compliant electronic signature. This is usually a service that's the private service providers will provide to you if you don't have an electronic signature. There will be an obligation also to create a human readable version of the invoice, because as you saw in Spain, we have only structured formats that are allowed. This is why they are also introducing human readable version. And we will have also a lot of requirements that will be applicable for the private service providers in order for them to be able to exchange invoices in Spain. They need to be interoperable. They need to be ISO 27001 certified. They need to sign the invoice. They need to provide support. They need to provide continuity plan and almost real full-time availability service. So everything I just said about Spain is still in draft, and we are waiting for the final version of the law. And so maybe this will change as it does in other countries.
Thanks, Camilla. Yeah, I think with Spain, it's certainly watch the space, monitor technical updates, guidance from the tax authority, as well as any new legislation that's issued and approved. So we're now gonna focus on ViDA, VAT in the digital age. We've mentioned ViDA quite a lot because really this is going to create not only the rules for e-invoicing in the EU, the rules that each member state must follow to be compliant, but it's also going to be a major catalyst for the adoption of e-invoicing, both at a member state level, looking to remove the barriers and complexities of member states implementing e-invoicing, as well as bringing in mandatory e-invoicing for certain supplies, and we're going to talk about that in a bit more detail, but also removing the barriers for businesses to adopt e-invoicing, even before a mandate is in place in a particular country, or ahead of a mandate coming in. So could you provide a bit of an overview, Camilla, on ViDA? What are the kind of three kind of key areas, and more importantly, focusing in on the e-invoicing digital reporting requirements?
Yeah, sure, Alex. So ViDA, or VAT in the digital age, we have what we call three pillars. The first one is the VAT rules about the platform economy. The second one is related to the single VAT registration for businesses selling to consumers across EU. And the last and not least is what we call the digital reporting requirement, or the DRR. Within this pillar, we have two different obligations. The first one is mandatory e-invoicing obligation that will be applicable for domestic transactions, as we have already in Romania, as Poland is planning, as France is planning. And the second obligation is the e-reporting obligation that will be applicable for non-domestic transactions or for EU transactions. The first, let's say, timeline was supposed to introduce mandatory e-invoicing for domestic transactions starting this year, 2024, and the mandatory digital reporting requirement starting from 2028. But since December 2022, we had a lot of changes in the project of this initiative, and this is why we are still waiting for it. So maybe I can walk you through what happened last year in terms of this digital reporting requirement initiative. So on December 2022, we had the first version of what we call the ViDA initiative, with a lot of proposal in terms of requirement, what will be the format of the invoice, what will be the way to exchange the invoices, what are the content, or what will be the content of the invoice or e-reporting, the frequency to submit those invoicing to the different tax administration. And from there, the EU launched a public consultation to get feedback from the different stakeholders, which a lot of stakeholders did during the last spring. Based on the different feedback that they get, a lot of changes have been proposed because of the different local initiatives that are already in place in different EU members. So from there, in October 2023, we had a vote by the European Parliament of the amendments suggested to the EU Commission proposal as part of the ViDA initiative. We were expecting for a final vote in December 2023, but we didn't get it. And instead, the ECOFIN submitted a report to the European Council summarizing the progress made by the Spanish presidency about the ViDA. And specifically about the digital reporting requirement, in this report, it has been indicated that, let's say, promising progress has been made, but the EU will need to continue working on the project because they need to reach out satisfactory consensus. The reason is that we have 27 countries, 10 or 15 of them have already different reporting in place, different e-invoicing in place. And the idea is to get all of those people to agree on the same model. This is why from January 2024, the Belgian presidency will need to continue to work on this ViDA initiative to be able to reach a satisfactory consensus between the different EU members. So again, we will monitor the changes and we will see what will be the different areas they will agree on.
Thanks, Camilla. And you know, I think these kind of renegotiations on ViDA with ECOFIN, that's just started last week. So you know, the plan was to kind of kick those off at the meeting on the 18th of January. You know, we're going to see a lot of discussion and looking to get approval by all the European finance ministers by probably mid-May. And Camilla, obviously we're still waiting, you know, for the detail. You know, there's been a lot of different amendments proposed. You know, there's still going to be a lot of debate, discussion, horse trading between member states. We just thought it'd be useful to kind of share a few of the examples where we think ViDA is heading, just some examples of the likely model that we're going to see. So I think on the screen now, we've got a few examples of these.
Yeah, sure. We have a few examples here in the screen, and yeah, basically the ViDA initiative is trying to harmonize the e-invoicing and e-reporting in the EU. So the first initiative or the first proposal is related to the format of the invoices that must be exchanged. As you may know, and we mentioned already, we have already an EU standard that is applicable for B2G transactions. And the idea behind ViDA is to use the same standard for B2B transactions. And there are a lot of stakeholders shared their feedback, saying that this is not possible because within the B2G transactions, we have structured data, or at least the definition of an invoice in the EU standard is a structured invoice, and stakeholders are pushing to have, let's say, hybrid format as Facturix in France in order to allow e-invoicing for small businesses and to allow them to read the content of the invoice, which can make it difficult in a structured invoice. The other second point is related to the fact that, as I said in the beginning, for different countries, the fact that so far, when an EU country wants to make e-invoicing mandatory, they need to ask for derogation from the EU. So they need to go through a process, get the derogation, update it as if required. And this is why this ViDA initiative is planning to introduce the fact that there will not be a need for this derogation, as e-invoicing for domestic invoices will be applicable, and there is no need to get the acceptance of the buyer. Then we have the fact that the companies will need to report their invoicing data within 8 days. Here again, some stakeholders are saying that it's too short, and there are some discussions about the frequency to submit this e-reporting. A big discussion also is related to the model that we call pre-clearance model. In this initiative, the pre-clearance model is not allowed, at least in the first version of the initiative. But a lot of countries, as you saw, already introduced a pre-clearance model or a centralized model where an invoice has to be validated first by the tax administration before sending it to the end buyer. And there we have really different countries giving different feedbacks in terms of the model to be adapted. So cannot wait to see what will be the final model that will be adapted by the EU through the ViDA initiative. We have also some requirements related to the list of the data that must be included in the e-reporting, such as the bank details or the content of the invoice itself, or if it's mandatory or not to issue simplified invoice in an electronic format. So those are all open subject for which we need or they need to find a common agreement in order to easy the process for companies and to create an interoperable and standard framework to exchange invoices and e-reporting.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Camilla. I appreciate how fluid the situation is, and we await final details. But I think what is clear is ViDA is coming. Even though particular elements may be pushed out a couple of years. As I said before, it's more the finishing line, not the starting gun for e-invoicing. It looks like we're running a bit short on time, so I'm now going to speed through a few other country updates. So first of all, Israel. Israel has implemented a live reporting mechanism to, in effect, register invoices over a certain value. Those invoices will receive from the Israeli tax authority platform a unique ID number. That number, an allocation number, will be required to be put on the invoice that is issued to the customer, and only invoices with that number will be able to be used to take an input tax credit. So, big emphasis on being compliant for both the seller and the customer. This was originally slated to be in place from the 1st of January. Unfortunately, due to the sad situation in the Middle East at the moment and the war, the ITA have provided a soft landing period for this. So even though the platform is operational today from the 1st of January, there will be no penalties, and the mandate doesn't formally start until the 1st of April 2024. And just to say I suppose the threshold of the invoice amount starts relatively high, around 6,000 euros, dollars. That will gradually come down every year, until all invoices are included. Now, looking in the APAC region, Malaysia has announced it will start implementing mandatory e-invoicing from August this year, August 2024. The interesting thing about Malaysia, there's going to be a dual process. We're going to have a CTC, tax authority clearance platform, run by the Malaysian tax authority, but there's also a Malaysian PEPL authority that has been established too by MDEC. So really, we're going to have almost two different work streams that can interplay together. So businesses on a rolling basis will be required to submit e-invoices, e-invoice data to the Malaysian tax authorities to a platform that is being developed, starting off with very large enterprises, the top 400 businesses in Malaysia starting from August. But then the PEPL network can also be used to exchange invoices between trading partners. These e-invoicing rules are going to apply to both domestic and cross-border transactions. And while most larger ERPs, service providers will connect via an API connection direct to both the PEPL network and the tax authority platform, there is going to be a more manual portal hosted by the tax authority for smaller businesses. So we're expecting more technical information over the next month. We're going to start to see things like the software developer toolkit issued. Malaysia has also confirmed that it will be implementing the PEPL international format, the PINT. There's been a draft version of that PINT standard for Malaysia. We expect to see the final technical specifications released shortly. And finally, over to the US. The US is a very interesting country when it comes to indirect tax. Of course, one of the only countries in the world without a federal VAT or GST, and instead tax is implemented at a state and local level. There are over 10,000 different tax jurisdictions in the US, and it's very easy to create nexus there, particularly post-Wayfair. Just a certain number of transactions to customers in the state can trigger a requirement to register for sales tax at various different levels. So because of that state versus federal difference, it's very unlikely there's going to be an e-invoicing mandate for general B2B transactions set at a federal level. We may see some digital reporting requirements, maybe e-invoicing at a state level. So really, this is going to be more voluntary. It's going to be driven by businesses. So we saw a Federal Reserve-sponsored initiative with the Business Payment Coalition to establish a market pilot to create an interoperability network in the US and across North America using a common XML standard. That pilot has now moved to production, and I'm pleased to say that the US has incorporated a not-for-profit, the Digital Business Network Alliance. I'm actually a member of the board. Very exciting, with some very large multinationals, big ERPs, and some other service providers as well. And the DBNA, the Digital Business Network Alliance, has created a set of common standards, policy guidelines, creating a four-corner network very similar to PEPL, the ability to register and connect once and share e-invoices with recipients across the network. So it's going to be decentralized. So you can use any service provider. Your trading partner doesn't need to use the same service provider, as long as that service provider is accredited member of the DBNA. So this has huge potential. This has just gone into production. We're seeing the first invoices issued and received in the last couple of weeks. So not a tax-driven mandate, but of course, due to the complexities of US sales tax is very much being key to the design of the standard, being able to meet tax at the various different levels, at a state level, county level, municipal level, and in fact, it gets more granular than that as well. So something to watch. I think this is certainly something that's going to be driven by multinationals and ERPs as they see the benefits and incentivize potentially customers and suppliers, trading partners to adopt the standard and join the network. Well, that was quite a round robin. I know we touched upon a lot of information. I wish we had even longer to touch upon even more countries, more mandates on the roadmap. This is an ever-evolving space, which keeps all of us busy. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Camilla. Please feel free to follow us and connect on LinkedIn. Our contact details are on the screen now. But I'd just like to say thank you ever so much for joining us today. I hope you found this useful. And please do join us for our next webinar, which we will promote on our website, on social media, as well as our newsletter. So it just leaves me to say thank you. Have a great day. And I'll leave it to Camilla to say goodbye to. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much for this useful information. I Can wait for our next webinar. So please do reach out to us, as Alex said, through LinkedIn or other channels, and speak to you or see you soon.
Thanks, Camilla. Thanks, everyone.
Yes.
Goodbye.